Hello, and welcome to episode 29 of What If Civilization Started Over. We're going to get right into this one. I'm going to do a few things before the major event of the episode. So the first of those things is that Cameroon is really weak, and so they will basically just give up the northern part of their country, and they'll just give it independence. And they hope that that'll stop its collapse, and this country will actually immediately become a constitutional monarchy, specifically so that it can join the Democratic Alliance. However, it's not going to be enough, as Cameroon's government will still collapse, and this will lead to Spain basically making a landing in Cameroon and rushing towards their capital, and their king will basically say, hey, if you help me stabilize my country, I'll be a vassal to you. And Spain is like, great, we don't have to, deal with anything. And so Cameroon is now a Spanish vassal. England will start, and we're around the year 1750 right now. England is invading into Kenya, and out of nowhere, the Democratic Alliance of East Africa will very quickly seize all of the important parts of Kenya. Ignore that major city being in the wrong layer, and these as well. But they'll quickly seize all of the important parts of Kenya, and then they'll basically very quickly set up a new Kenyan government. So let's basically see what this looks like. It's just like that. England will seize a lot of the rest of the land. But there's very few people here, although realistically Africa should be a little bit more populated by now. But it's definitely nowhere near as densely populated, or honestly it probably has less population than Europe. You can imagine, these major cities are actually huge major cities, whereas the major cities in Africa are kind of tiny. Also, wow, these ideologies are outdated. This is not here anymore. Rome is not here anymore. And Galicia is not here anymore. Okay. And Brittany is a constitutional monarchy. I don't remember them being that, but sure. So yeah, Africa is continuing to not do well. Because I was going to say, the other three democracies over here will all join the Democratic Alliance of East Africa, which has now just become the Democratic Alliance of Africa, which is also the main anti-colonial alliance of Africa, but non-democratic countries such as, these guys are not allowed to join it. Okay, the next thing is going to be a minor thing. These countries have done, basically the Middle East has done absolutely nothing for a really long time, so I kind of want to change it. And Yemen is basically going to have a revolution against their monarch, and it's going to mostly happen in the eastern part of the country. So yeah, these guys they don't want the original Yemen country. They remember that it exists because they have history, but they write down history, but that's not what they're doing. They just kind of don't like their current government, and so they will start over here. And these guys, it looks like they're invading on the map because I can't really distinguish it, but really these guys are just gaining popularity, so they gain popularity over here. Meanwhile, Oman is like, no, that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that we are going to just take land from Yemen and use this as an opportunity to, and then Arabia is like, wait, don't count me out of it, and so they will also do that. Meanwhile, the capital of Yemen has just fallen. The royal family fled to another city that has fallen, and the royal family flees now, but they can't really flee to so they flee to the island of Socotra. But Somalia will take the opportunity, actually, and Andalusia's kind of counted themselves out, and they're really having trouble accessing their Indian colony. In fact, they're probably were going to give it independence until they seize Socotra, and now they have a slightly better way of getting there, although the Suez Canal still doesn't exist. They find a few, I think these are the Seychelles. They colonize, the Maldives, maybe, and then they buy some islands off of England. So England still can prevent them from getting to these islands, but it's much, much easier for Andalusia to access their colony once they get Socotra. So that's why they took it. Meanwhile, the old Yemeni government has therefore fallen, as they were captured by Andalusia, who actually wants to use this as an opportunity to set up a Yemeni puppet state. As they start their own invasion of Yemen, as well as Oman, basically saying, hey, we have the correct government of Yemen, like they're in our hands. So this old Yemeni government, this new Yemeni government is a rebellion that needs to be put down. And obviously the Andalusian government military is pretty strong. Yeah, the Omani capital falls, but Arabia signs a peace treaty with these guys before Yemen and Oman are actually divided up. The old government of Oman has kind of just collapsed, so this new Yemeni government will sort of take over the mantle of ruling over Oman, as Arabian troops are struggling to actually invade in, but Andalusian troops are doing much better. But in an embarrassment for Andalusia, they'll actually lose this capital, and eventually it's just annoying for them, so they agree to sign a peace treaty with the new Yemeni government, so let's see what happens. And Yemen has established a democracy. This is a direct Andalusian colony. These are an Andalusian puppet. But Andalusia is still struggling to stay on par with France as the second strongest country, but they're very close. Spain's the third, England's fourth, and I don't even know if Belgium is in fifth anymore. They've really fallen off. There's really the four main players. They kind of think of themselves as the four great powers, but obviously the rest of the world wants to fix that. Anyway, they joined the Democratic Alliance of Africa, which is now just the Democratic Alliance of Anti-Colonialism. And then Mesopotamia is going to have their civil war restart when some of the European countries, and it's like all of the European countries besides England, actually. England's just out of it, but they don't like these guys either. Basically, they start funding Mesopotamia. They start funding Mesopotamia to invade into these two guys. So this is mostly Andalusia. Actually, no, it's mostly France funding Mesopotamia. Andalusia is not really doing much. They're kind of just, they're not really doing anything. And then Spain is funding Egypt to launch their own invasion. The theocracy will surrender much quicker than the democracy. So the theocracy is surrendered at this point. And Turkey's like, why not? And they decide to get in on this. But Caucasia cannot, because right as they start mobilizing their army to do so, Russia launches an all-out invasion of them that collapses them very quickly. Because Russia is, remember, trying to get back to their old strength as the number one country in the world. And they just massively took out Caucasia. And that was around the same time that happened. The democracy finally caved, so let's see what this looks like. Ideologically, we've got some erasing to do. 1, 2, 3 countries have just disappeared, and Mesopotamia is feeling like they're back even though they're not really back. Like, they're still very weak. In East Asia, Belgium is trying to get their old prosperity back, because when they lost their colonies, or when they had the Democratic Revolution, they sort of lost a lot of their prosperity because they stopped being colonizers. So they'll do this. You know, they kind of want to get it back. They know it'll take a long time to get their prosperity back, but they're playing the long game. They also buy Taiwan, not from Indonesia, but from England, which, you know, says something for sure. And England also will give them this, as they are desperately trying to find a way to actually access these colonies more easily. Because right now, the way they're accessing their colonies is going through the North Pole, around the Bering Strait, and then coming down, which is not always the best. However, they do colonize these Alaskan islands, as well as just yoinking some of them from Siberia, and they're probably going to try and take Siberia at some point. But before that happens, we have to go to Spain, and more specifically the Spanish colony in India, because the Indian people are not happy being Spanish subjects, and they have, like, no rights whatsoever. So Spain is trying to control these colonies, and what they do is they take people from their American colony, and they send them over here to fight against the guerrilla war that's taking place. Red color is the rebellion, because I can't come up with a better color for it, so it's the same color as Ethiopia. Obviously, it's not Ethiopia. Anyway, Spanish troops will make a landing first in Sri Lanka, which they will easily take. And Sri Lanka doesn't really rebel it that much anyway, so I'm actually going to have them in that color. Then they'll make landings on the southern tip of India, Can't really see major cities behind this. One sec. Okay, right, as I was saying, they take the southern tip of India, and they're actually doing pretty well. However, their European rivals, specifically Andalusia, is doing their own thing into the Spanish colony, which Spain takes as an invasion. And at first they think they'll deal with that later, but then India launches their own invasion into this territory to liberate it. And France isn't doing anything about this. France is happy with the colony they have now. They don't want to risk it getting larger and perhaps letting the rebellion spread. Anyway, so Spain is doing really well here, but they also decide to just declare war on Andalusia because they do what they thought should be an empty threat. They basically say, hey, we'll declare war on you and take your American colonies if you keep invading into our Indian colony. Andalusia calls Spain's bluff, and then the Spanish king makes a really dumb decision. It was supposed to be an empty threat, and then he makes the decision to just declare war on Andalusia anyway. The first thing that happens is that he orders his troops to invade into and take the Roman colony, which is really quick. And it actually is very quickly, formally annexed. Because the Roman people didn't like Andalusia, they preferred Spain. Then the Caribbean colonies, and I forgot that France had a colony here. Anyway, the Caribbean colonies are ordered to be invaded. And Andalusia wasn't defending these, so that works out well for them. However, it leads to Spain losing ground to the rebels in India as they sort of start getting forced out of everywhere except Sri Lanka, which will probably remain a Spanish colony no matter what. And the rebels officially join up with India, but I'm going to leave them as this color because Andalusia thinks it's fine to invade into this land, but not into the proper Indian land. So that still matters, and also Spain claims this land. So, they might try invading into it. Over in the colonies, Andalusia's finally sending some troops over. And instead of trying to invade the western areas that Spain doesn't care about, which is what Spain thought Andalusia was going to do, and that's why they were okay with doing this, they instead land in the southern U.S., which is where most of the colonial population is. And they basically take these people and do really bad things to them. The Andalusians do really bad things to them. And Spain tries to use this as, an excuse to do a draft, which works, but basically this war is really unpopular, and the colonists basically demand Spain ends the war because they are fighting for Spain, basically, and they're actually doing decently well. But they start demanding that this war ends because it's a waste of money, while Spain is still trying to retake their Indian colony, which is not going well, as India is actually pushing back Andalusia at the same time. And Spain and Andalusia are pretty much just back at the original war. However, things are about to get much, much worse for Spain. And this might be the end of the Spanish Empire, because France just joined in on the war. And they joined in on the war hoping to, get a lot of stuff out of Spain and get maybe some of their old colonies back, as they will invade Spain, occupying them. However, this is not necessarily a great idea. Spain wages a guerrilla war that's the most successful guerrilla war, probably more successful than any guerrilla war in our timeline ever was. And they basically take the entire territory back because France is just not worth occupying. But during those 5 years, the American colonists, and this might sound familiar, the American colonists have revolted. Not actually the northern part, just the southern part, as the rest remains loyal to Spain, but Spain is starting to lose ground. Their Venezuelan colony is actually held up really well because Andalusia wasn't really trying to invade it, nor was Brazil. But Andalusia has managed to retake during the French occupation. During the French occupation, Andalusia managed to retake the colonies, or the Caribbean, because why wouldn't they? This has been completely forced out as Spain has basically been forced to formally renounce their claims on the colony and cede it to India. And they cede it specifically to India because they hope India will be able to push Andalusia out, which they are able to do. And India basically forces France to sign a thing saying that this French land was stolen. And France is like, hey, as long as we don't have to give it back, right? But India is going to try and use that later on to justify an invasion of their old territory and retaking everything they used to have, because this was a really beneficial war for India. I mean, any war between Europeans is good for non-Europeans, right? Also, look how populated France is. It's insane. So yeah, France is going to be able to retake Galicia. But these Americans are not just going to sit there. Instead, they start doing this. And of all countries, Belgium gets in on the war. As they want to, again, like you saw in China, they really want to regain their own prestige. They bought Taiwan from Britain. They take the only two major cities. They march an army all the way down to this city, which we'll pretend is something that you could do because there's literally no one who lived there. So honestly, it's not that shocking that you could do that. And at this point, Andalusia will take this here, and yeah, pretty much the entire Spanish colony has fallen. However, Spain is deciding to just withdraw all their troops from here, recognize American independence, and instead support Venezuela. As Andalusia decides, foolishly, some might say, to retake their Indian colony. And it actually goes really well for them, as without the Spanish distraction, they're doing really well for their Indian colony. As they take the capital of India, force India to unsign the thing that says that France stole their land, and to give, basically to make the entire country of India an Andalusian protectorate. But France basically forces them. The other European countries are like, okay, we're not letting you do that unless you give us some stuff. So like Spain demands their Indian colony back despite having lost their American one, and they get less of it back because it's like clear that they're weaker. England demands a part of the old Spanish colony, and even Belgium is like, hey, can we just have like, I don't know, like the old land that you used to control. And then even the capital of this country is moved over here. And just to show how different the Indian government is, the entire monarchy is abolished, and it's basically replaced with a dictatorship, an Andalusian dictatorship, as these guys are even more of an Andalusian puppet than these guys. Speaking of dictatorship, sorry, Indonesia. You are, like, very much an English puppet at this point. Okay, let's see how the Americans and the Europeans divide up this new colony, or this new land. Spain gets to keep this colony, and then these are this, and ideologically, this new American colony will not be a monarchy. Skip that part. This new American colony will be a democracy, and obviously, their capital will be actually in a new city that has existed the whole time, but I just have not bothered to put it in, which is right here, because most of their population is in the south, and it turns out that they actually had a much larger population than I was letting on, which is why this is possible, as a few more major cities are going to pop up all over the Americas around this time, as they're starting to become a much more lucrative place to just be and stuff. So yeah, that's going on, and so you might think, oh, that's a nice little episode. But a few more things have to happen. First of all, Japan has broken its isolationism and it wants to catch up to Europe. And the year is, by the way, it's 1790 now, because the American Revolution was over by then. But anyway, Korea used to be a Japanese colony, and it is again. And the last event of this episode, besides the second to last event of this episode, is going to be a Japanese invasion of Siberia that goes really well, until Belgium decides to jump in on this, and they're actually cooperating with the Japanese on this, and Japan is doing much more of the work, but Belgium is threatening Japan, saying, hey, you're going to give us an equal amount of the share, right? And Japan has to say yes, because although they're emulating Europeans, they're not as strong as Europeans yet, but Manchuria is going to lose. And the Belgian colony is here, and the Japanese colony extends up to here, as colonialism is about to reach its peak. In fact, it has already reached its peak, since the Americas thing is, hard to recover from. One thing is about to happen that's going to change the world, as you know how these guys are not really a democracy. A prime minister gets elected who is basically of a party called the Whig Party, which basically wants to turn this form of democracy into this form of democracy, which is basically the king as just a figurehead. The king doesn't like this, and there's a big battle that goes on within France, but the king is also incompetent, and it was really unpopular, the thing he signed in India specifically, which is why the Whig Party even ended up winning out. The king is kind of incompetent, and Spain is kind of upset at France for existing. So what Spain will do is they will first seize Galicia, since it was at some point part of Spain, so they feel like they deserve it. And that will cause France to invade into Spain, because I kind of think that makes sense, right? Like, justifiably so, since Galicia was at one point Spain's main thing. The Prime Minister of France is like, you shouldn't have done that, as he then basically makes his own army. He will rebel in the areas where the French king is least popular, which is the southeastern part of France. And just when you thought it was bad enough for France, or I guess this doesn't have anything to do with France, but Rome will rebel from Spain, because there should have been Andalusian maybe, but Rome as well as these islands will rebel from Spain. I think this is closer to the old Roman color. We're never going to get the exact color, and it's not the same government, so it's fine for it to be a little different. But yeah, this is what next episode is going to be about, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.